Well, I'll do a follow-up here on the General Flynn case. Yesterday, the Circuit Court of Appeals for D.C. en banc decided to overrule, I should say, the previous three-judge panel's decision granting a writ of mandamus to General Flynn and to order the Judge Sullivan to dismiss the case as has been requested by the Justice Department. And based on historic precedents, I think this is what should happen. And it's also interesting to note, and you should note here, that it was a totally partisan split. Every Democrat voted to overrule the three-judge panel and to basically let Judge Sullivan proceed. And the two Republicans voted the other way, and the third Republican recused himself for reasons I don't know. Perhaps he'd made some statement about the Flynn case sometime previously. It was on the record, or I have no idea why he did that. And I think one of the Democrat judges' last day on the court was on Monday, so there'll be a vacancy which can then be filled here, which would change the balance on this court. This is a kind of an important court because almost all the trial cases involving political figures in D.C. tend to go through that court. And so the fact that the Obama administration, by removing the filibuster for appointments below the level of Supreme Court, was able to totally load the court up with young Democrats. So that's kind of an outcome, which then led, of course, to the removal of the filibuster for Supreme Court judges, all of which is probably going to destabilize the country in the long run. But at any rate, in the short run, this is where we are. So back to the real merits of the case. As far as I can see, the argument seems to be that the majority made in this case was that the writ of mandamus should be used primarily in the case in which there was no other reasonable means of appeal, and since the final sentence or verdict hadn't been given, he does have a potential means of appeal, and therefore it isn't necessary. And the other side basically is ruling that the judge's behavior is completely unprecedented and leads to the idea of bringing the judges in as a biased figure in proceedings rather than as an unbiased figure. I think it's a short, layman's level understanding of the legalese that's in the decision. That's essentially what it is. Because after all, there's no case being prosecuted at this point by the Justice Department. So if the case goes forward, there's no prosecution. But the other issue, it seems to be there's a concern that this is really an attempt to get into somehow the question the Justice Department's internal proceedings, which would be kind of intruding into their bailiwick. So the question is, what does this mean for General Flynn and his attorney, Sidney Powell? Well, the options available seem to be the following. One would be to just accept it as is, go back to Sullivan and see how it plays out. The other idea would be, of course, to make an appeal to the Supreme Court. Of course, the question is, since the Supreme Court hears so few cases per year, would they actually hear the case? And if they did hear the case, how would they hear it? I mean, the possibilities for the Supreme Court are the following, it seems to me. Not to hear the case, and which would mean that it would be a lengthy procedure going on for months at least before a decision would come down. Or finally, the third possibility, which I think seems to me less likely but could be done, the Supreme Court could simply, pretty expeditiously with a 5-4 potential majority, simply overturn the en banc decision and reinstate the lower decision and order the case to be dismissed. Now that's kind of unusual for a Supreme Court to do something like that. But they can do what they want to do because they are the Supreme Court, right? So we'll see what happens there. And the other question on the Powell team is, and their question is should they really continue? Could they, fight it out, or just go ahead and face the music and then deal with the music once it's played? Because, like I say, going back to May, there wasn't really anything that would have prevented the judge at that time, if he wanted to hold Flynn in contempt, to have held him in contempt then. He didn't need to go through all this. He could have just said, okay, I'm going to dismiss the case, but I'm also going to hold you in contempt, I guess, or maybe do it in the reverse order or something. I'm not. So, but he didn't. So that's why the theory is he somehow wants a fishing expedition, although I'm not sure exactly how that would proceed. I mean, after all, is the judge going to become an interrogator and put Department of Justice officials on the stand? Can he issue a subpoena on his own? I don't think so. I don't know exactly where this irregular procedure is going to. I guess we're going to learn some things about irregular court procedures and how irregular they can be in the days ahead. So at any rate, we'll have to see what the Flynn team does at this point, and then what actually happens. The thing that I'm kind of left with the idea that if they actually proceed to trial without the prosecution, it would kind of come down to, okay, prosecution, present your case, and they say basically, we have none. Prosecution rests. Defense says basically, we didn't do it. We agree with the prosecution. We did nothing wrong. So does it go to a jury for a decision? That seems absurd. So I don't know. The fishing expedition theory seems to be more likely what Sullivan has in mind, but it's very murky as to how that would proceed. I mean, I'm just like looking at this thing and going, you know, this is a case run amok if there ever was one. And of course, I guess if Flynn is still paying or due his lawyer's fees, it's sort of finding him incredible amounts of money continuing to fight this thing. On the other hand, I suspect that President Trump would like to avoid having to issue a pardon before the election. He already had to do one in the case of Roger Stone, so you don't want to look a little bit like you're pardoning too many friends. And I suspect that General Flynn would like to be vindicated by a court decision rather than having to be pardoned also. Well, I guess that's about it for now. If you like these videos, like and subscribe and forward them to any friends or anything that are interested. And we'll see what happens in the Flynn case in the days coming up.